welcome to Cook With Me Live. Thank you so much for being on tonight. I know that it takes a lot of effort to be on here at 5:30 tonight, or if you're watching this as a recorded version, then thank you for actually taking the time to invest in your health and learn maybe some new skills along the way for how you can be cooking in the kitchen on an everyday basis in a much easier, helpful way, hopefully. That's my goal. So tonight we're making crepe style wraps. Now what I mean by that is there's lots of different kinds of wraps that we can make. We can make wraps in the dehydrator. We can make wraps more like a tortilla, which we've also done another Cook With Me video on. These are more crepe style, as in they're going to be very thin. They still hold very well though. And the advantage in this is that they will be a lot faster to pull together because we're going to be building them in a blender. So in that sense, you can even have the mixture pre-mixed the day before, and then if you're needing to make them for morning before school lunches, for example, you just pull out the blender jug, pour them in the frying pan, and you can make your crepe wraps fresh in the morning. But that being said, you don't have to do that either because they actually store really easily in the fridge for say 3 to 4 days. Haven't done a lot with freezing of them. Probably because they're so quick and easy to pull together, you probably wouldn't maybe go that extra step to freeze. It'd be a little bit more mucking around in my personal opinion. But because they are so easy and they do store in the fridge fairly well for a few days, you could get your fill of wraps for the next couple of days and then easily make another batch next time. So as everyone's logging in, please give me a hello. Let me know if there's anyone else in the kitchen with you tonight. I definitely love hearing who's doing that. And other than that, if anyone's already making crepes or who loves crepes, that's another thing I want to hear about. Because you can definitely eat these like crepes. They're just going to be maybe slightly thicker than a traditional French style crepe, which is almost like a paper thin texture. Okay, so these ones are aimed more at durable enough to have as a wrap for lunch. And then we're going to put, savory fillings in, but tonight I'm also going to show you a couple of my dessert little special fillings that I like to whip up for a quick snack or for a bit of a treat or a dessert after dinner. So we're going to do both a sweet and a savory tonight, and I'm going to do a bit of a free flow, even though I've given you some savory filling ideas. Okay, so if you're all ready to go, let's get everything out. First of all, though, we're going to mix up the crepe mixture in the blender. So that's the first step. So we're going to need to get out your flours. So the tapioca flour, we can use either coconut or rice flour as well. Then we're going to need either buckwheat, or sometimes you can get away with a sorghum flour. You can use sorghum flour instead of buckwheat as well. And when it comes to blending gluten-free flours, this is why we need to do that, is so that we can benefit from the different types of textures that each of the flours provide. So that's why most gluten-free flour recipes do call for more than just one flour. It doesn't behave the same as a gluten-based flour. So we need to mimic it by using all of them together. So welcome everyone, thank you very much for being online. If you guys are ready, give me the hello, give me the go ahead, and we're gonna get stuck straight in. So you're gonna need, like I said, a blender. Now you don't need to have a Fandangle blender, high speed, anything for this recipe. As a matter of fact, you can even just do it in a bowl. I find it's just easier to chuck it all in, push the button, and then you've got your pouring jug all ready to go as well. But even a bullet style blender, the upside down ones, that's perfectly fine. Or even just a stick blender, the immersion blenders will work for this too. So just keeps it nice and easy. All right, so I'm gonna get out those flours. Actually, let's come on back here and we're gonna mix it up back here straight into the blender jug. Once you do this once, you'll get a feel for what texture and consistency we're looking for, and then you'll be able to double or triple the batch quite easily if you're making up a big batch, say on the weekend for a weekend brunch. But in the meantime, let's start out with just a single batch so that you can establish the texture that we're looking for, that consistency that we're looking for. And the reason why I say that is because unless you're measuring by weight when you double or triple a recipe, it's very likely that the textures are going to change quite significantly when you double or triple it. Okay, so measuring by weight is the most accurate, but if you're not doing that, that's okay. You'll just need to know what end consistency we're looking for. All right. Let me just bring you guys over with me so that I've got you on hand in case you have any questions. All right, so we're going to start off with half a cup of tapioca starch. If you don't have tapioca or you can't have tapioca, you could technically use potato starch as well, but the results might be slightly different. And you could possibly omit it, but it is a fairly important ingredient to get the hold in this recipe. So we're going to have the tapioca starch. Let's just get a spoon to spoon this into here. And for those of you that are kind of new to baking or new to gluten-free baking, one thing that I think, a little tip that I could give you now that could potentially improve your success rate on future recipes is when you're measuring by volume. So when you're using a measuring cup like this, it's very important to scoop the flour in as I did, rather than kind of fill the cup by mushing it around in the jar. Only because if I were to do this like completely and show you the difference, half a cup of flour measured in one way, so let's say I packed it all in there and I kind of mushed it around the jar and leveled it off just like this. If it's packed in there, half a cup of flour could weigh, say, 70 to 80 grams. But then if I were to scoop it in properly, like you're meant to, like I just did there, and then level it off, it can actually be then as little as 60 to 65 grams, which over half of a cup is actually a huge difference compared to the end result, because most recipes that we're going to use will have at least 3 cups of flour in it. So my point here is, if you're using volume to measure your flours, do the scooping method if you want the most accurate way for most recipes. Otherwise, just go by weight. Okay, so there's our half cup tapioca flour. Then we're going to need each a quarter of a cup of coconut flour and a quarter of a cup of buckwheat. Now I'm going to use whatever I've got left over here of my coconut flour, and then use the rest rice flour, because you can tell that I love my coconut flour used in the right way. So I'm going to use just whatever I've got left there, scoop it into, oh, I've got my half a cup out, so I'm going to do the both at once. Okay, so as you can see, we need a quarter of a cup of coconut flour and we need a quarter of a cup of buckwheat. So I'm just going to put the two into a half cup, and that'll be the equivalent. Okay. Whoops. Try not to break the place. Okay. So roughly then we've got our next half a cup of flours. Okay, and instead of packing it down, that's going to make the weight inaccurate. So we just want to kind of level it into the cup and then off the edge. Okay, there's our quarter of a cup of coconut flour and quarter of a cup of buckwheat. Next up, we need a little pinch of salt. You could use about a half a teaspoon. It's going to give a bit of extra flavor, otherwise this is a really plain basic white wrap. So about a half a teaspoon of your good quality salt. Ideally your Celtic or Himalayan. This happens to be a mixture actually. So a level half teaspoon of that one. Again, once you do this a couple of times, you'll get a feel for how you can improvise. But for now, let's start with exactly how the recipe is called for. Okay, so that's going to be for our dry ingredients. That's all we need. It's very simple and straightforward. Then we need 2 eggs. Now, I do get questions, can we do this recipe without eggs? I have tried for many weeks to come up with a version that works. And look, I have found one that works. However, it's nowhere near as nice to work with. And in my opinion, it's going to frustrate most people more than the benefits that come from not using eggs if you're not wanting to eat eggs. So what I would recommend is, we've got a double yolker here. Must be some happy chickens. If you are kind of worried about eggs, or you're questioning whether or not you want to do the whole like vegan diet, or however you want to approach that, just make sure that you're getting a really high quality egg. So please just go certified organic. Ideally, you've got them in your own backyard, but if that's not possible, then certified organic eggs. I know they cost more, but they are night and day different in the eyes of the body. I'll even just give the quick example of just the omega-3 content. So the omega-3s are those essential fatty acids that we desperately need to eat every day because our body cannot produce them. And in a conventional cage egg, or even some of the free-range eggs, the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 can be out by as much as 30 to 1. Ideally, we want them balanced, and in a certified organic egg, they are balanced. So it does make a big difference in that sense. So we're going to use 2 big eggs. And then with the water or the non-dairy milk, we need about 1.5 cups. So start with 1.5 cups. And then you'll see what I mean when I want you to get the texture right. We're going to judge that when we get it in the pan, and I want you to see just how liquidy we need it to get that thin texture. Okay, so we're going to start with 1.5 cups. I'm just going to go measure out some filtered water while we get, yeah, we'll keep that simple. So let's get your water or your non-dairy milk. You could be using some almond milk or some coconut milk. You could potentially be using soy milk if you're having that, but I'd recommend definitely an organic soy. All right, so I've got some nice filtered water here. And just to make sure that I've got this all measured, let's make sure we've got our, okay, so a couple ways of doing that. So I've got 2 cups in there. So I'm going to start with about 1.5 cups. Okay, a little bit more. And then I'm going to reserve that. I may need a little bit more. The reason why I've done it this way is so that if you do need more, you can write it down in your notes, and then you'll know next time that you might need that extra bit, but you'll know by how much. So especially if it's somebody else that ends up making the recipe with your chosen combination of flours, then you can make that adjustment straight away. Okay, blend it up. And it really doesn't need to be much more than that. So there's our batter. Crepes are literally that easy. Now the next step basically is to get the pans on. I would recommend that you use 2 pans at once because it's more efficient if you can kind of juggle that. They do take a couple of minutes to cook, so you should have time to comfortably do one and then do the other. And then we'll get that roll on happening, okay? So, how is everyone going? Are we caught up? Any questions so far? Okay, Neve, good question. Would you mind sharing the version without eggs? That kind of worked, as we have 2 high egg allergies in the family. Very used to and frustrated at cooking times. Yes, okay, I understand, Neve. I will share that version with you. It's not amazingly functional, but that's all right. It basically comes down to starch content in the wraps. So one thing you may want to look at if you absolutely cannot do the eggs, there's an amazing technique. It's a Brazilian way of cooking actually, and it's all to do with hydrated tapioca flour. So I can't remember, Neve, if you guys can have the tapioca, but maybe you could look a little bit into that. I'll be doing that eventually on a Cook With Me, but that's another way to make a wrap. Literally the only ingredient is tapioca flour, but it's had a hydration process and then a straining and draining, so it's a bit more work, but if you're definitely wanting wraps that are egg-free, that's an option. Okay, so if you guys have got your 2 pans out, they do not need to be the exact same size. This is probably the ideal size for a crepe, crepe style wrap. We're just going to start them, getting them some heat. Okay, we don't need to go full heat. I'm just going to go 7 for each of them and let them warm up nice and evenly. Now, just quickly while that's happening, I just want to explain how we can make, these are Solid Technics pans, and they are a hybrid between a cast iron and a stainless steel. So if you're working with a stainless steel pan, and I would highly recommend that, if not cast iron, over any form of coated or non-stick pans, no matter how expensive they were, no matter how non-toxic they were marketed, that's a very strong recommendation I would make. Not that you need to turn around, freak out, and completely redo your whole kitchen of Teflon, but please just do a little bit more research into that and educate yourself about the alternatives that you have. So my favorite ones are the Solid Technique pans, stainless steel or cast iron, straight up the heavy cast iron. Now, how do we make those types of pans behave like a non-stick so that they're enjoyable to work with? Believe it or not, it's just as easy, it's just a different method. So it's going to feel maybe a little bit challenging until you get the hang of it for the first couple of times, but once you figure it out, it's so easy. You do the process every single time you cook with them, and you can literally flip your eggs like in the pan. They can be that slippery if you've set up your pans correctly. So what we're going to do is let the pans heat up quite thoroughly first. And ideally we're going to get some water and flick it on it, and we're going to, if the water kind of dances and bubbles across the surface, then we know that they're hot enough to start out with. So what that's doing to the pan, there's actually these little microscopic grooves inside the stainless pans or the cast iron pans as they're cast, as they're built. So as the heat heats up and as it heats up thoroughly, those grooves start to seal. So they start to form their nice smooth surface on a very kind of, not quite microscopic, but pretty close level. So once they're really hot, then you put some oil in and not before. And then that does its own little magic trick to finish sealing those grooves. And then you're ready. You can even turn the heat down a little bit from that point. You don't have to cook on searing heat. Turn it down a little bit and then you're ready for, you'll have a non-stick pan. So as your pans are heating up, and if you're using gas, they're probably getting there pretty quickly. You probably want to have a good 1 or 2 pieces of paper towel on hand as well. If we have too much oil in the pan, it's going to cause the crepes to be a little bit broken in pieces, or to not hold as well. So that's one little tip, is don't put too much oil in the pan. Okay, so we'll get out a paper towel, and then as far as a high heat safe cooking oil goes, now I've highlighted this one because I also have the virgin version, but see how this one says purified and deodorized? This is what's called the third press coconut oil. So the first press is extra virgin, the second press is virgin, the third press is what we want to use at high heat. And that's because this doesn't have the delicate, albeit very nutritious elements in it that are going to turn to trans fat at high heat. So this one's safe at high heat. We just use a little bit for the sake of lubrication of the pan. And then if we need to add in more oil to our dish after, then ideally we add a more nutritious version of it. But this is still cold pressed. This has not been processed at high heats like most of your other cooking oils. So it's a big difference there. All right, I'm going to test these pans out, see how we're going. So I'm just going to take a little bit of water just to show you what I mean. Okay, so it's not quite dancing and bubbling off the surface. So we could go a little bit hotter. That one's good. Okay, so I guess the burners are going to heat at different rates. So we'll start with that guy then. Okay, so now that it's that hot, I'm just going to put, I think I called for a teaspoon in the recipe, but I don't even think you need a full teaspoon. This is just going to be half a teaspoon. A little bit of oil in there. Okay, and I'm just going to use the pan to swirl it around. Make sure we get the surface covered. And we don't need any more than that. Now, if you can do this, I'll show you the safe way to do this, with a piece of paper towel, or 2 if you'd like. You can get a pair of tongs and your paper towel, and we just want to take off the excess oil. So we're just going to go around and take the excess off. Not super critical, but it's just going to make for a better crepe. Okay, so take the excess off. It does get pretty hot, so leave that to the side. And notice I've turned the heat down now to about medium. So we don't need to burn the crepes. You'll learn after your first one whether you got it too hot or not hot enough, but that's what we're going for. Okay, the other thing you'll learn as you do this first one is whether or not you've got liquidy enough mixture. So this batch is going to make approximately 6 crepes. So give it a little, I'll just get you to make sure we're zoomed in on the pan here as I go. So we're going to go approximately 1/6, which you won't really be able to estimate until you have done a couple. And then just gently around the pan, not to kind of go all the way up the edges, but just to make sure we've kind of got it smoothed out. Okay, easy, right? Maybe you guys will do that and then let me know how you've done. Let me know how it's going. This one should be ready now, so I'm going to do this one now. So a little tiny bit of oil. You can swirl it around first, or you can just use your trick with your paper towel. Okay, and then we're ready to get this guy up. So make sure you give it a little swirl before you put it in. And I'll try not to go the full size of this one because it's quite a big pan. There we go. So this saves you all the fandangle expensive French equipment that you can get imported in from France just to make crepes the perfect way. You know, in my opinion, at home, we don't need them to be perfect. They just need to taste good and they need to function. So this is my way of doing it. Hopefully it works for you guys. Okay, so now once they're cooking away, what we're gonna start to look for is see how the edges are starting to curl up slightly. Just slightly, that's what we're looking for. So you'll need your flipper. Some people call it a spatula. And ideally you have a bit of a skinnier one than this. This one's a bit thick. And we're just gonna go around the edges and just loosen it up around the edges first. And then we can flip. So I normally use one hand and flip it over like that. Okay? This one I can turn down a little bit now. And like I said, you'll get used to your pans. They might all be at different temperatures and cook differently, but that's okay. So we're looking for that lift around the edges. This one's not quite there yet, but it's got quite a thin edge. So we might be able to get away with an early flip. Yep, look at that. So guys, these pans literally have no non-stick coating, but this is how we get them to behave as if they are a non-stick pan, is just that little bit of preparation. And as soon as you get used to the flow of that, I promise you it's not hard. It's just a new habit. There we go. Okay, so then you'll need a place to put them as we put more on. So just a dinner plate is fine for that. And this guy's probably ready to go. It doesn't need long on that second side. There we go. Okay, so just a little bit of bubbling on that side and we should be good. The first side is the one that takes the most time to cook. There we go. Okay, now the one thing you want to check on, it's very likely that as this mixture sits, and especially if you've made it the day before, it's going to start to thicken. So if you notice that it doesn't quite pour as thinly as your last time, then we'll just need to add a little bit more water gradually as you go so you can thin it out. Because if it goes too thick, you'll just find that you'll get quite a gluggy wrap. So we really want to keep that going until it's thinned out and doesn't want to move anymore on us. Okay, so I can already feel, and it's a bit hard to show you on camera, but I can already feel a little bit of thickening happening just when I swirl it around. So something for you, this is why this is so cool to be doing this on video with you, is because I can explain that. Can you imagine if I had to write that out in a recipe? So these are the subtle nuances and things that I want to be able to bring across to you, kind of like I'm there in the kitchen with you. And I know for those of you especially that are new to cook with me, the whole thing might seem a little bit weird, but this is like me being able to feel like I'm literally standing in the kitchen with you, and this is exactly how I would be showing someone if there was someone physically here in the room with me. So that's what I mean. Okay, and knowing that this is getting a bit thicker, I'm going to add probably another, let's see how much that works out to. So I've already used up 4/6 of my mixture, so I'm probably only going to add about a tablespoon of water. Okay. We could potentially do 2, make sure that's incorporated. We could maybe do another one, because as it sits, it will thicken. And just as easily, you could pop that back on the blender, obviously, but okay, let's go back and check our crepes. All right. Okay, so the only thing is, and you'll get a hang of this, is as they cook, if you happen to overcook them, it just is going to make them slightly harder to roll. So we want to kind of get on the undercooking edge. See, this is why you got to follow the instructions and loosen all the way around the edges first. So I'm a little bit premature on this flip, but that's all right. There we go. Okay. So now, generally speaking, as you kind of get your roll on, and now this is becoming a bit more natural for you, I know we only have 2 to go, but now this is where I start cutting up and preparing all my toppings, because ideally, if I've got some that are going to get lightly sauteed, I'm going to put them in the pan, because the pan will be hot as soon as we're done cooking the crepes. All right, so let's come back over here, and I'm going to start cutting up some ingredients. You're welcome to stay stationed at the stove if you want to be watching that. And then getting ready to flip as you go. But you can also maybe be having a think, and maybe you already have done this, as to what kind of ingredients you want to be putting into your wraps. I have literally just gone into my fridge and gone, you know, what have I got? What have I got that we can work with? And I'm going to pull out some asparagus. I'll do some mushrooms I'm going to saute with that, maybe a bit of onion. Might chuck in some capsicum. Okay, so just a quick little lesson on asparagus while I'm here. Some of you are probably wondering, why did she just cut like that? I normally take off the bits that I feel are going to be quite woody and tough. And you can test that by just cutting through it. And it's going to get, at some point, a lot easier to cut through. It's going to be less woody. So you find that by just cutting up into the stem until it's really easy. So I didn't need to take that last bit off because now this is actually, these are all good. I'm going to use these. They're not too tough. But that's how you can tell. You just take off the woody bits by chopping slowly into it, and then you can figure out where you're at. Bear with me there. If you guys want to take off your next crepes and put the new ones on, I'm going to do that really easily. And as you can see, because that was so simple, if you needed to whip up another quick batch now, you definitely could as soon as this last bit's in the pan. Very simple to get another batch on. Oh, I probably could have saved that for two. We're going to have one big one. Okay, so if that happens, you're just going to get a really thick wrap. That one can be my husband's. Let's come back. Let's cut up some veg. All right. So I don't know, you guys might be very busy cutting everything up, but I'd love to hear what you're going to be putting in your wrap tonight. I'm sure there's lots of combinations and creative ideas that you've got out there. So when the pans are done, I'm going to do kind of a steam fry of my asparagus. Now, just quickly on asparagus, because the bases are quite thick with respect to the tops cook really quickly. So what I'm going to do, and this is not absolutely critical, but I'm just going to make a slice down the middle of the base, because I still want to leave the asparagus intact so it can lay in my wrap and be wrapped all in one long piece. But I'm just going to put a little cut through there so that they steam a bit faster through that thick bit. Okay. Whatever veggies that you happen to be cutting up, then just think about which ones may benefit from a quick little saute in the frying pan and which ones do I want to have fresh. All right. Okay, so those are ready to go. I'm going to put in some mushrooms with that. Chop these guys up. Nothing fancy. So of a morning, let's say that you're getting some crepes ready for wrapping for the school lunches. Maybe the kind of common default is ham and cheese. How can we maybe have a discussion with the kids in advance and come up with some new ideas? Come up with some variety in your diet. Not even necessarily, you might be buying the best quality cheese and the best quality ham that you can possibly get. So it's not necessarily about that. It's possibly about the idea that we just need to get more variety into the diet. So you can use the crepes as a bit of a bargaining tool if that's the element that they really, really love. So then I would ask them, let them know that they're welcome to have crepes, but we got to choose some other savory toppings. So it's just as easy to, chuck in some things into the frying pan if they want to lightly saute, have some warm elements. But if you're wrapping it for school lunches, maybe easiest if you've done that the night before, so everything's nice and cool. Okay, you can stay right there. I'm just going to flip these. And if you're doing the same, you may be probably getting really good at it now. Come on over here for the big boy. I just realized I probably should show you in case you accidentally poured in too much. In this case, we will have to go around the edges, and we're going to have to make sure that it is properly cooked all the way through in order to flip this one. So if you go a little bit too thick, it will take longer to cook. There we go. So all the way around the edges. And if you're starting to have troubles flipping it, we might need to leave it go a little bit longer. Yep, okay. So I'm going to let that cook just a little bit longer. It's not wanting to let go on me yet. So pretty easy, right? Other things, ways that you can get creative with this, if you want to be really fancy and you want to do, say, some sweet crepes for a birthday party food as a treat instead of, cake or something, You can actually now get creative by dyeing them different colors with, obviously not food dyes, with real food. So beetroot powder can turn them pink. Cacao can make them look chocolatey brown. You can be using juiced greens. So for example, juiced spinach is probably the easiest one with the least amount of flavor change. So you can be using spinach juice basically to turn it bright green. You can be using turmeric powder and carrot juice to turn it yellow. And I'm sure, you know, there's plenty other I can think of, but the idea here is you can get really creative with this, and you don't necessarily have to then have a traditional birthday cake. You can do something a little bit different and let everyone decorate their own crepe. There we go. Okay, so loosening up around the edges. Just had to wait long enough for it to fully cook underneath, and then we flip. There we go. Okay, this guy's done. And I just have a little mini bit left. So I ended up getting 7 crepes out of this one. There we go. Okay. So crepes, very easy. Now storing these in the fridge, you can just store them in the fridge like that and then covered on the top. They do not need layers in between. They will not stick to each other, and then you'll save the environment and a lot of plastic. So, or even paper. Okay, so they do not need to have layers in between, they just need to be covered on top. Ideally, if you've got some of those beeswax wraps, like the fabric wraps that are coated in beeswax, that would be ideal. All right, let's just finish these guys off and then we'll be ready to get some sauteing happening. How's everyone going? Does anyone have time enough to write to me and let me know if you've been able to figure out the flip and the crepe? Hello Annie, thank you for being on tonight. Jane, welcome, your first cook with me. And Simone, hello. Karen, Shari, hello, welcome. Or Cherie, sorry, I'm sure that is. And we've got Lorraine and Angela on tonight. Who am I missing? Neve, thank you. Oh, so good to have you guys on Cook With Me. You've made my day, thank you. That one needs a bit more time. Let's see how this one's going. Yeah, that one's all good. So, now, again, this is something I can't really bring across on the video, but you'll be able to feel it. That one is significantly thicker than the other ones. So that's okay, it just is gonna make a different texture of a wrap. You're going to get more of the gumminess in the wrap rather than the feel of the ingredients, which some people may love. Now, because I'm not quite exactly ready with my veggies, I'm just going to turn these pans down a little bit and get ready to flip the last one. There we go. And turn that one down. Okay, so let's get back to preparing our fillings so that we can just get these sauteing in the frying pan, and then we can get to eating. I'm sure everyone's madly cutting things up. But as far as ingredients goes, obviously the sky's the limit. So play around with it, but I would encourage you to, I don't really know if I can say do whatever it takes, but really try to incorporate more variety into your diet. If there's any theme that I experience in all my work that I do with people and do at events, it's the idea that we're just eating the really similar veggies over and over and over, and then maybe wondering why, you know, the kids are having trouble getting used to trying new things. It's because it's maybe not a habit in the family to try new things all the time. And it's maybe not celebrated potentially by some of the adults in the family to try new things. So that's sometimes what kids can pick up on. Okay, so I'm ready now to go pop these into the frying pan. I'm just going to give them a light saute. Okay. So if you're going to be doing similarly, then a couple ways we can do this. I'm going to start off with sauteing these bits first, and then I'm going to kind of steam cook these on top. So nothing too complicated there. Let's come on over. All right. that heat up just a little bit so we can get that sauteing action happening. If you want a little bit more oil in the pan at this point, you can do that. Another little dab. The other thing I'm going to add to my wraps is actually going to be some black beans. I forgot to mention that. So I'm going to drain a tin of black beans and chuck them in. And we'll just get these guys sauteing. And if you haven't had the opportunity to put together, you know, a sauce or anything for your crepes and you don't have anything made up in the fridge, we can always just lean on a little bit of really good quality olive oil and some salt and pepper for that as well. So here I'm just going to do a bit of seasoning with my spices rather than relying on a sauce. Depending on the flavor that you want to achieve, you could even now be putting in a little dash of tamari or a dash of coconut aminos, something to give it a little bit more oomph. You could be putting in some slices of garlic or some fresh herbs. Okay. And these guys, I kind of want to steam them. Now I'm getting all picky. I don't want my special asparagus. I love asparagus so much, it's a bit of a treat, so I want to do that specially. Okay, so here's a bit of a deviation. You guys go ahead and continue sauteing whatever you're doing. I'm going to get a little stock cube out of my freezer and I'm going to steam the asparagus in my stock cube just because I can and the pan's there. So check on that for me. Okay, so I freeze my stock in silicone cupcake containers, and then they're ready to grab out of the freezer at any time that I need it. So I'm going to use that to steam my asparagus in. Okay, I'm going to call that one good. So they do not really need to be super cooked, guys, in this case. The more we cook vegetables, the more vitamin C we lose, and a few of the other heat unstable vitamins. So in this case, I just want to go very minimal on that. Okay, pop that stock cube in there. And then with that steam, we can put the asparagus in there. And ideally we can put a lid over top of that, just to keep a bit of the steam in. Doesn't have to fit perfectly, but we just want to create a little bit of steam action under there. Take our last crepe out, turn that guy off. Okay. And then I'm actually going to use my little bit of olive oil over my veggies here rather than in a frying pan, just because it's a little bit sensitive if you're getting a good quality olive oil. So those veggies are ready. That's just going to steam away. And let's use some black beans in there as well. So we're going to strain those out. Give them a rinse. And you can have these cold or warmed up. I generally like them warm. So I could even just toss them right now in with the asparagus. Nothing complicated. There we go. Okay. So let's bring this chopping board back over and then we can get some of our fresh ingredients ready to go. And because that's the last of the things I'm going to be cooking, I'm actually going to just turn the burner off so I can set it and forget it. And then if I keep yabbering on, it's not such a big deal. All right, so do we want cucumber in? Do we want tomato? Let's just get a few little pieces together for that. A couple slices of tomato. So you can see that this can be a really quick dinner when you've got the hang of things, or maybe what you've done as a form of preparation in advance during the day is you've made up a pesto, or you've made up a cashew cheese, or maybe hummus or something that you can be putting in with it as your flavor component, and then you're going to use the rest of these veggies just for their awesome qualities in and of themselves. How's everyone going? Everyone's pretty quiet tonight, so I want to make sure everyone's caught up. Hopefully we're not having any crepe dramas. Please let me know if you are. If you don't already know the avocado trick, yes, I have turned the knife upside down because I don't actually want to cut through the skin. I'm less likely to do it like this. And then spoon. Easiest way to slice an avocado. Especially if they have really thin skins. There we go. Okay. That's pretty much done. Now, if you want, you can have a pre-taste of your ingredients to make sure you've got enough flavor built into that, like I said, or you can kind of cheat and have your pesto already made, or your hummus, and put a lot of flavor jam-packed into these spreads or dips that you want to put in your crepes as well. You could even be making, a white sauce to go through that, especially if you're going to be having something like dill and salmon in your crepe, which was traditional for me as we had crepes as a kid. And I'm going to put some fresh greens in here too, because my garden is just being wonderful to me at the moment. So I'll get some of those quickly chopped up. And guys, if anyone's wondering, like, do I actually do this at home for dinner? Yes, I do. This is exactly how I cook for dinner, and this is exactly how easy it can be if it just becomes a new habit. If you just have and develop and take the time to get the picky eaters used to expecting new things all the time, for example, then that's what I call as a form of investment, which is going to save you a lot of time and headaches in the future, so that you can just play, you can just create, you can just be free in the kitchen. And I know that's a bit of an ideal situation, but many of the clients that I work directly with, especially in my programs, that's exactly what they get to. It just takes a little bit more time and a few of the specific strategies that we work with. So, okay, let's get a dinner plate up, because we're pretty much ready to plate up our first savory wrap. Okay, so I like to do like this. I'll grab myself a wrap. Actually, this one's a nice little one, so I'm going to save that one for dessert. Let's grab a bigger one. So see how nicely they come apart? They're not going to get stuck or anything. They're easy to work with. They hold together well. So let's grab that guy. Okay. So again, now less is more when it comes to a crepe. You're better off having two with less stuff in it than having one big massive one that's really hard to wrap. So I'm just going to put a little bit of stuff in. It's very easy to overdo it by the time you've got lots of different ingredients. So there's a little bit of that, a couple pieces of avocado. You might want to add a bit of extra seasoning, so maybe a little bit of all-purpose herb mix if you've got that, or a little bit more salt and pepper. But it really doesn't need to be more complicated than that. A couple of black beans. That's even too full. It's so easy to do when you've got lots of ingredients, but there we go. Roll up the crepes. And if you were serving this to a dinner party, for example, you could be having like a baking tray, and you just line them up in the baking tray, cover it in sauce, put it in the oven, and then you've got something that you can serve to your guests. Okay, so there's a savory wrap. And then just quickly, I just want to show you how versatile these are for us to go with a sweet wrap. So if you want a little bit of a dessert treat at the end of the night, or like I said, if you want to have a little bit more of a, maybe like a sandwich lunch version in school lunch boxes, then a couple other things you could do. Try and think, how can I squeeze the special superfoods or more than just peanut butter and jam or peanut butter and honey or Vegemite and butter? How else can I squeeze more nutrition into them? So here's how. One is, let's try to love tahini. You can tell I love it because I'm nearly out of it. But tahini is probably one of the highest forms of calcium that you can get, especially into a child. So I love to put a little strip of tahini in there, having to scrape the bottom. Okay, so I got my tahini. Maybe this one I will do with some frozen blueberries. Let's sprinkle some frozen blueberries in there. Okay, and I like a bit of coconut yogurt through that as well. Again, this is like kind of a dessert wrap, so a bit of coconut yogurt. Not too thick, that might have been a bit much. And then because the blueberries are cold, that's going to keep that nice as it wraps up. And then these are just some hemp seeds. So another little bit of extra omega-3s, beneficial nutrition there. And if you wanted at that point, you could maybe do a little drizzle of maple or honey. But then we have our dessert crepe with rollaway blueberries. You can get creative, have fun with this. Let the kids come up with a name for it. Like, let them make it their own recipe, and that way they'll be more likely to want to take part and to indulge. I've had one family that says they call them their, what was it? The Mario tubes, like the magic tubes that they go down in the video games. So for some reason, this is the magic tubes. Other ones call them dessert cigars, which is, you know, take it or leave it as a name. But basically, there's a little dessert wrap. So that can be that one. Just because I can, I'm going to do one with some peanut butter, frozen banana, chocolate chunks, and especially because I'm using dark chocolate chunks, they're much better. Okay, so please, again, if your kids are used to eating milk chocolate, maybe make it a new rule that you kind of start getting used to more darker and darker chocolate. Otherwise, there is no chocolate. So there's some frozen banana, a little bit of peanut butter. There we go. Obviously, you can be using any form of nut butter or paste. And so at this point, some other superfood ideas that you could be putting onto here could be a little sprinkle of lucuma powder, or maybe you could be using maca powder, or some more hemp seeds. Sneak them in for a little bit of crunch. Some toasted nuts and seeds that could go in. All different kinds. But there's our chocolate peanut butter wrap. So there we have it. Okay? So hopefully you guys have found this nice and easy. I would love to hear your feedback and let me know what your ingredients are, what your filling choices were. But there we have some savory, some sweet, and then you can see that with any leftover wraps, if you have any leftovers, they'll be pretty easy to use in the next couple of days, 3 or 4 days. All right, so there we have it. Kind of dinner and dessert all in one, and or lunches for tomorrow, whatever you choose. Thank you so much, guys, for being on Cook With Me today, and we'll see you next time for the next recipe we come up with. See you then.